Hey guys, what's up? It's Alex over at Laser Everything, and today we're talking all about laser timing. So if things like the start TC or laser off TC delays are confusing you, this is the video for you. Laser timing is universal between fiber, UV, and CO2 lasers, and it works mostly the same way in EzcadLite 2, EzcadLite 3, and Lightburn. So if you're using any of those things, this is a great timing video for you. Don't go anywhere because we're getting started right now. Okay guys, so this video covers a lot and it's going to get really confusing really quickly. So I just want to take a minute to talk about kind of the overview of what we're going to be doing today so that we can kind of like a general idea of what's going on. Also, if this is your first time watching this video, I would watch it all the way through to the end without trying to keep up with me and setting things along the way. Once you've finished the video once and you've had like a good chance to just kind of absorb the information, then go back and rewatch it and try to follow along and get your machine set up right. But for now, I would just sit and absorb everything you can. It's one of those episodes where we really just need to understand the basic concepts of what we're doing before we actually try doing it. So watch the whole thing through, then stop, rewind, and try to follow along with me. I think that's the best way to consume this video. We, or well, most of us, are familiar with the standard parameters: speed, power, frequency, and if you're a MOPA user, pulse duration. But there's more to our lasers than just these common settings. There's actually an entire subset of settings that our lasers need to operate correctly. These are settings you've likely seen before. The main ones are Start TC, Laser Off TC, Polygon, and NTC. And in this episode, we'll also be talking about your jump delay parameters and how to get the best mark in the shortest amount of time. I also just want to take a second to point out that even though this tutorial is being recorded with EzcadLite 3, they also apply to EzcadLite 2 and Lightburn for Galvos, so feel free to follow along if you're using one of these pieces of software. The only people that may have some trouble are EzcadLite users, who will notice that jump delays are handled a bit differently. We won't be getting into how EzcadLite handles jump today. The timing stuff is all exactly the same, just jumps a little different. And I know once Lightburn is released, it'll work fine the way this tutorial covers things, just the way that we cover it here. So just cross your fingers for Lightburn soon. So as far as initial setup, here's what we have to do. In EzcadLite 3, we're going to start by setting our jump delay settings to 500, 500, 500, and you can leave the jump limit at 10. In EzcadLite 3, these are right out in the open for us to edit, but in EzcadLite 2, they're hidden behind the advanced menu, which lies underneath our standard parameters. In Lightburn, we can find our timing and delay settings in the machine settings up here. These values are the slowest but safest way to configure the jump delay and guarantee quality. The reason we're starting here is because we don't want our jump delay issues to influence how we're setting our laser timing above. If our jump delay is off, it will affect how we set timings, and then when timing is done and we start tweaking the jump delay, it will reveal that our timing settings weren't actually correct. If marking things as quickly as possible is not important to you and your only concern is quality, you can leave these jump delay settings how we have them set and ignore that part of the tutorial. Once that's done, we're going to come back to our timing settings here and set all of them to 0, except our NTC, which we'll leave at 100. Again, we'll come back and chat about that in a few minutes. With all of our values set to a constant, we're ready to begin setting things up. The first two parameters listed here are Start TC and Laser Off TC. Anytime we draw any line, or curve as EzCAD calls them, a few things happen. The laser fires, the mirrors start moving, it marks the curve, the mirrors stop moving, and then the laser turns off. Start and Laser Off control a delay that is applied to the laser to determine exactly when these processes start and stop. Here we have a line that represents one hatch line in our hatch shape. The laser begins at the left and moves to the right. For Start TC, if firing the laser is delayed too long, the mirrors will begin moving before the laser is fired, causing gaps in our lines. If the laser delay is too short, the laser will fire before the mirrors start moving, burning a hole in the start point of the line before the curve is drawn. Note the EzcAD tooltip for Start TC describes this setting as a delay in the movement of the Galvo mirrors. This isn't correct and can confuse a lot of people. A delay of 1000 means that the laser will be delayed longer, causing a gap. A delay of -1000 means the laser would be fired sooner, causing a burn. If this setting were for the mirrors, the opposite would be true. Just wanted to clear that up. In EzCAD, it's very easy to check and fine-tune our Start TC settings. All we need to do is create a box. This one is 20 millimeters long and 8 millimeters tall. We're going to go ahead and hatch it with a line distance of 2 millimeters so that the lines are clear and easy to see. We're also going to make sure average distribute line is checked so we get a nice, easy spacing for our 2 millimeter hatch. You're going to want to mark this on a material that will show fine details well. Most of you have metal business cards lying around. These work great. If you don't have them, I'll have a card in the top right corner that links you to where you can pick up some cheap ones for testing. I'll also leave a link in the description. For this initial test, we're going to set our Start TC value to 1000 and leave the other timing and jump delay values alone. Again, a Start TC value of 1000 means that the laser is going to wait 1000 microseconds before firing. Don't forget to label your box, and then go ahead and mark it on the card. We're going to do a lot of these, so give yourself lots of space to work. Once that box is marked, we'll change Start TC value to 500 and change our label and mark the next box. You're going to work your way through a series of values until you have a card with examples of all your Start TC settings from 1000 to -1000. Your final Start TC card will look something like this. We can see with a delay of 1500, the laser starts firing way too late, and the gap that we discussed earlier is clearly visible on the card. If we look at some of the other values though, it's much harder to see what effect our settings are having. To continue, we're going to want to use an inexpensive USB microscope to inspect our results. If you don't have one, I recently published a full review on a couple different USB microscopes that would work well for this. There's a card up in the corner and a link in the description if you'd like to check that out and pick one up. I highly recommend it. Let's take a closer look at our Start TC test card. Here, with a laser delay of 1000 microseconds, we can see the gap is massive. That's because the laser is waited too long after the mirrors have started moving to fire. As we move through our different tests, we'll see that the laser is firing faster and faster with less of a delay, causing the line to come closer and closer to the contour of the shape. Here's 250 and 100, for example. As we come to 50, you'll start to notice the point where the hatch line meets the contour, and we're beginning to see a bit of a bulge at the intersection. This is the beginning of a laser delay that is too short. As we cross into the negative delay at -50 and -100, we see the bulge and the accompanying hotspot become larger and more prevalent. At -250, -500, and -1000, we see our burn spot becoming quite aggressive. The laser is now firing so long before the mirrors begin moving that we're really starting to scorch our material. Our goal is to find the setting where the lines completely intersect, closing the gap without burn-in. On my machine, you can see that at a delay of 100, you can just barely see the rounded corner of the beginning of our line. If we take a look at 50, we can begin to see the burn-in bulge. Our best bet here is to split the difference. So a Start TC value of 75 microseconds is going to be the value we want to use for this machine. Quickly, I'd also like to point out that the hatch lines that fill our shape are not the only curves on this test card. The contour line that creates the boundaries of this shape is also a curve. It could be a triangle, a hexagon, or some weird asymmetrical shape that we're hatching, but in this example, to keep things simple, we're using a square. This curve starts and ends in the bottom left corner. If our delay is too high, the bottom edge of our contour will have a gap between the corner and the start of the line. If it's too slow, we'll see burn-in at the corner before the line begins. EzCAD sees the entire contour as one curve, so the other three corners are not affected by the start and laser off TC settings. Those are controlled by the Polygon setting, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. So let's start talking about our next parameter, the laser off TC. The laser off parameter sets the delay in turning the laser off when the mirrors have finished drawing the curve. If the delay is set too high, it will take too long for the laser to turn off after the mirrors have finished drawing their path, again causing burn-in. If the delay for turning off the laser is set too low, the laser will turn off preemptively before the mirrors have finished drawing the curve, causing a gap between the hatched line and the contour. With our Start TC set correctly, we'll begin again with a new card and a new series of text boxes to experiment with the laser off TC. Again, we'll start with a laser off value of 1000 and work our way through the various reference settings until we reach -1000. The setup of the test box is identical to that of the Start TC test. Once we're done marking our test boxes, we will take a look at our laser off TC card. You can clearly see that with a laser off value of -1000, -500, and even -250, the laser is turning off much too early, leaving a gap as the Galvo mirrors finish drawing their curve. Once again, however, we will have to examine our test card using the USB microscope to find our ideal setting. Essentially, we are looking for results similar to that of Start TC, just on the opposite end of our hatched box. From -1000 all the way to +50, we can see a clear gap before the hatch line reaches the contour. The delay is simply too short, and the laser is turning off prematurely. At 100, we can see the hatch line finally make contact with the contour, though we can still see a rounded tip where the hatch line meets the contour. At 250, we're finally starting to see some nice right angles and possibly the beginning of burn-in at the intersection point. At values of 500 and 1000, we can see the delay in turning off the laser is far too long, and the burn-in is damaging the intersection point and reducing our edge quality. Let's back up and look at 100 again. It's clear the line is ending just a tiny bit early as we can see the rounded cap of the hatch line, but 250 is a little too burny for my liking. Once again, the appropriate setting is likely somewhere between the two. You can create a second test card expanding on the two values if you think the correct value is between the two you've tested. That's exactly what I've done, and I found that my best results sit around 175 microseconds. If you're getting this close and the correct value is between two settings, you don't have to do another test card. You can simply split the difference. The results will likely be very good. Once again, I'd also like to point out that Ezcad sees the contour as a curve. While our other three corners in this rectangle are controlled by the Polygon setting, this bottom left corner will be affected by the laser off TC value. The laser leaves from the bottom left corner to the right, moves up, over, and back down to the start position. If the delay is too short, the line will not quite make it back to that start position. If the delay is too high, we'll see burn-in at the bottom left corner again. Moving on to Polygon. I've said it twice, but it bears repeating. Ezcad sees the contour of these boxes, and any shape for that matter, as one complete curve, regardless of how many sides it has. The start and end of this curve are controlled by the Start TC and Laser Off TC settings, but these other three corners are controlled by a setting called Polygon. Essentially, even though Ezcad sees, for example, this entire square as a curve, the Galvo mirrors still must stop at each corner to change direction. The Polygon setting tells the Galvo mirrors exactly how long to stop while turning each corner. If we stop for too long at each corner, we will experience burn-in while the laser sits at the corner waiting to continue along the curve. If we don't stop for long enough, the Galvos will not create a 90-degree turn, but instead curve around the corner point, creating a soft turn instead of the desired sharp change in direction. While we could set up our Polygon test in a similar fashion to the Start and Laser Off TC, I find it's a bit hard to compare the results that way with the boxes being so far apart from one another. Instead, we will create a square in Ezcad 20 millimeters high by 20 millimeters wide. For this test, we're going to focus on the corner in the top right of the square. Remember, the bottom left corner is controlled by the Start TC and Laser Off TC, so it's not a good target for this exercise. By focusing on the top right corner, we know we will get an accurate visual representation of our changes to the polygon parameter. Like the other two settings we've looked at, which we now have set correctly, we're going to start our polygon setting off with a value of 1000. Don't forget to label it by the corner so we can keep track of what we're looking at when it's time to examine the results. Once you mark it, change the polygon value to 500, update your label, and mark the second just a little bit higher and to the right of the original square. Do this for the same standard values all the way down to 0. The polygon value cannot be set below 0, so we won't have to worry about negative numbers this time. When you're done, your polygon test card should look something like this. The first set of squares on my test card covers the values 1000 to 0. Since my correct value appeared to fall between 250 and 100, I created a second set of squares that cover that range. We'll come back to those in a minute. At a glance, it's very hard to determine anything looking at this test card with the naked eye. So again, we'll turn to our USB microscope to work out the details. Once we're looking at our first set of test squares under the microscope, it's very easy to see why we went for the cascading squares for this experiment. The top right corner of each square is very close to its neighbor, so it's very easy to compare the results from one value to the next. Looking at our results, we can see a delay of 1000 microseconds in each corner is far too long. The burn-in is clearly present, as it is at 500 and 250. When we jump to 100, however, we can see that the right angle is suddenly very rounded and lacks the sharpness we're after in the corners. Continuing to 50 and 0, we see the roundness of the corners very clearly becomes worse. With this knowledge, we know that our ideal setting is landing somewhere between the burn-in of 250 and the roundness of 100. As I mentioned earlier, we've created a second set of cascading squares, which allows us a closer inspection of the values between 250 and 100. For this set of squares, I chose to use increments of 25. As we move from 250 to 100, we can see the burn-in gradually fade out and the rounded corners start to return. I think for this laser, a polygon setting of 150 offers the best balance between sharpness and curve. We have a nice right angle, but no burn-in is visible on this corner. With that, our polygon setting is complete. These are the three major timing parameters we have to have dialed in order for our laser to work correctly. Now, if you are just concerned with your machine working right and you don't care how fast or slow your laser is completing jobs, you just care about quality, you can leave your jump delay settings at 500, 500, 500 and end the video here. It's going to work just fine. Everything's going to work exactly the way that you expect it to. But if you really want to dial things in and get your laser moving super fast, but retaining that accuracy, continue on. Buckle up though, because things are going to get a little weird and this part can be kind of difficult to understand. So sit back and we'll try to tackle it one little bit at a time. We have one setting left in our timing parameters here, and that's NTC. It took me a very long time to figure out exactly what this does, and explaining it is a little complicated without getting into the jump delay settings we keep talking about, so we're going to leave it at 100, skip it, and come back to it at the very end. That means the next thing we have to do is learn what jump delays are, how they work, and why we would want to customize the way that they're set. In order to learn about jump delay, we need to talk about what a jump is. Anytime the Galvo mirrors have to move from one marking position to another, a few things have to happen. The laser needs to stop marking in its current position. Once off, the Galvos have to reposition themselves in the next place the laser needs to mark, and then the laser has to turn back on. This process in Ezcad is known as a jump. When the Galvo mirrors must perform a jump from one marking position to another, they have to stop what they're doing very quickly and change direction. Once a jump is performed, the mirrors in their next marking position need a period of time or a delay to stop shaking before beginning the next marked curve. If we don't give the mirrors a long enough break, we'll start marking our next line while the mirrors are still shaking from the jump, which causes all kinds of nasty defects in our mark. There are three jump-related settings we have to pay attention to: jump speed, min jump TC, and max jump TC. We're going to break down the jump delay settings into pieces so that we can better understand how each value affects the quality of our engraving and what we can do to mitigate the effects of mirror vibration. The first one we'll take a look at is jump speed. Jump speed is pretty simple. It's the speed at which the jump is performed. The faster the jump, the more the mirrors are shaking when they reach their next marking position. To demonstrate this, we'll take a quick look at the first section of our jump delay test card. You won't see any boxes here, as jump delay is most easily tested with text, since the mirrors have to make a variety of long and short jumps in order to execute all the marks required to draw the text. For each test, we wrote out a simple label with our settings, hatched at 0.02 millimeters, and then applied the corresponding settings for each mark. You'll notice our minimum and maximum jump delays are both set to 0. For the purpose of demonstrating how jump speed directly affects the quality of our engraving, we do not want to apply any delay that might correct those defects. This will make them really easy to see. Obviously, a faster jump speed will translate to a faster overall runtime, but it comes at a cost. If we take a look at our test card under the USB microscope, we'll see our first test was done with a jump speed of 7,000 millimeters per second. The results are horrible. There is clear evidence that the mirrors are continuing to shake as they proceed to each new line that needs to be marked, and you can clearly see a path from the 7 through the following zeros where each jump is occurring. As we proceed down the list and begin to slow our jump speed, you'll see the defects begin to disappear. Even at a jump speed of 1,000, we can see pretty clearly there's a fair bit of bubbling at the start of each new line, which is affecting our edge quality. It isn't until we reach jump speeds of around 100 or so that the defects caused by our vibrating mirrors are completely eradicated. So just set a low jump speed and be done with it, right? Well, unfortunately, it's not that simple. An ultra low jump speed comes at a major cost when it comes to our job runtime. For each speed increment, I marked a bit of sample text and recorded the job time. At 7,000 millimeters per second jump speed, we see a runtime of 2.44 seconds for our sample text. It's pretty quick. Around a jump speed of 250, that time increases to 7 seconds. At our slowest jump speed of 25, the same exact job takes a painfully slow 46.1 seconds to complete. And that was just for a bit of sample text. It's pretty easy to see why low jump speeds are not an effective solution to this problem. And that's where jump delays come in. Here's the deal. It takes much longer for the Galvo mirrors to make a jump at 25 millimeters per second and not having them shake in the first place than it does for them to make the same jump quickly, but just give them a little bit of a delay so that they can settle down before moving on to the next spot. To illustrate this, we'll need to take a look at the second section of our jump delay test card. In this section, we see a constant jump speed of 4,000 millimeters per second, which is fairly fast. Each new line, we apply slightly less of a delay, and we can see our mark quality begin to degrade. With a jump speed of 4,000 and our minimum and maximum delay set to 500, we see results akin to that of when our jump speed was set around 100. The difference is massive. With the jump speed at 100, we saw a run time of 46 seconds, whereas with our jump speed set to 4,000 with a delay of 500 microseconds applied, the same job runs in 3.17 seconds. Wow! It's a big difference. Now, in this section of our jump delay card, you will notice that all of our minimum and maximum delays are the same. For most average users, this setup with a jump delay of 500 on the minimum and maximum is fine. It'll give the mirrors plenty of time to settle no matter what jumps you're making, and you'll retain excellent quality despite the 4,000 millimeter per second jump speed. If you'd like to take things one step further, however, we can take some time to try to find the best balance between quality and time by tweaking these values and assigning minimum and maximum delays separately rather than together. Not all jumps are created equal. Some jumps are shorter than others and require less of a delay for the vibrations to stop. Other jumps are longer and take more time for the mirrors to settle. There is one final jump delay value. In EzCad 3, it's labeled jump limit, which by default is set to 10 millimeters. Any jump longer than this value will get the maximum delay, but any jump shorter than this value will receive some delay between the minimum and maximum value. When both the minimum and maximum jump delay are set to the same value, the controller will always allow the mirrors to rest for the same amount of time, regardless of the length of the jump. If we instead drop the value of the minimum delay, the shortest jumps will now delay for far less time. Looking at the final section of our jump delay card, we can see a few tests I did where the minimum and maximum jump delays are set separately. At 100-500, there is very minimal distortion. At 50-250, the vibrations begin to become apparent. And at 25-100, the delays are no longer effective, and we again begin to see the tails forming from the mirror vibrations during the jumps. At this point, I also have to point out that the time savings between the 100-500 setting and the 25-100 setting is just over 1/10 of a second. Whether or not these sacrifices in quality are worth the boost in speed is up to you to decide. After trying a ton of different combinations for my machine, I'm very happy with the results I get with a minimum of 250 and a maximum of 500. On my machine, this retains 100% of our quality while still saving us a tiny bit of time on the smaller jumps. For me, quality over speed is a no-brainer, but I know for some of you guys, you are using a different machine or have different applications where quality may not be as important over just getting the runtime down to as little as possible. Ultimately, the jump delay settings and how you set them are completely up to you, and it's going to boil down to a lot of just trial and error, testing things, working with different minimums and maximums to find out where you can still get that great quality at really high speeds without lowering your delays so much that you start ruining your engravings. And it's a lot of work. It's going to take some time. There's no easy way to do it. Just a lot of guess and check. My main goal was helping you understand how these parameters work and how they're affecting our engravings so that you can dial them in and get them as close to where you need them to be for your needs. So now that we've talked about jumping and jump delays, we can swing back around and talk about our fourth timing setting, NTC. In a nutshell, NTC simply pauses the laser after each curve has been marked. It's exceptionally difficult to find any information on what changing this value really does, but I was able to do a little experimentation on my own and came to some conclusions about its use. My best guess is that pausing the laser after each curve was an early attempt at what we are now doing with the jump delay settings, giving the machine time to let the Galvo mirror settle before moving on to the next marking area. With our jump delay disabled, I ran some sample text and slowly raised the NTC value to observe the changes. With an N value of 1, we can see the messy vibration marks that would normally be corrected by our jump delay. As the NTC value rises, slowly we start to see those defects begin to get corrected. But by the time we reach an NTC value of 10,000, a far cry from where we started, there are still obvious defects in our engraving. A very minimal improvement, and I should mention, a massive time cost. With an NTC value set to 1, our sample text mark time was 2.75 seconds. With an N value of 10,000, our mark time increased to 8.11 seconds, nearly 4 times slower. The improvement in quality is marginal at best, and the time it costs us to make those improvements is astronomical. When we add our jump delay settings back into the mix, we can see from NTC 1 through 10,000, there's absolutely zero change in mark quality. At this point, the only thing we've done is increased our job time. For this reason, I recommend leaving your NTC value at the default value of 100. A very, very brief pause at the end of each line isn't going to hurt overall run times, and setting the value any higher only stands to slow us down. I have heard a lot of people say that these settings need to be set for every speed at which you would want to mark, which would mean you would have to find these new timing settings for just about every laser parameter in your library. I wanted to put this to the test and hopefully debunk it so I could save you guys some time. In my testing, I found that even when calibrating your timing for low speed settings, which I did, the timings stay consistent up to about 4,000 millimeters per second. Typically, most common Galvo heads that are sold with these machines are only rated accurate up to 4,000 millimeters per second, despite max speeds being listed in the 7 to 10,000 range commonly. As we peek at our results for the 7 and 10K, we can see that things really start to whack out. Not only are the timings seemingly off, but we also run into other issues like beam width issues at different ends of our curves and a host of other problems. I suppose if you really need speeds beyond 4,000 millimeters per second, it's worth it to attempt to dial your timing in for those speeds. But for most laser settings and most people, these settings are set and forget. Another quick note, Lightburn treats timing and delay parameters as global parameters, meaning you set it once for the machine and forget about it. If you want to override your timing for a particular pen or setting, you may do so in either the pen settings or the library parameter settings on your machine. EzcAD 2 and 3, however, treat timing and delay settings as local settings, meaning they only apply to the parameter you're currently working with. Once you configure your timing and delay, I highly recommend assigning these new values as default for your machine so that any new settings you create will have these values automatically. Any settings you created before adjusting your timing will need to be edited and have these new timing values corrected manually. There was a lot of information in this episode, and I really recommend going back and watching it again, this time following along and trying to set your settings as we're doing them. When broken down into their individual components, they're fairly simple ideas, but it's hard to see the overall picture if you're just getting started. Just like everything else on Laser Everything, mastering your timing settings for your laser is going to take some repetition and practice. I just want to reiterate, you should not be copying my values out of this video. They won't work for your machine. Every single machine is going to have its own set of timing parameters. If you have any other questions, you can always reach out to me or the staff on Discord. It's discord.gg/lasereverything, totally free, or our brand new Facebook group. It's facebook.com/groups/lasereverything, and I'll put links down in the description for you. If you got value out of this video, don't forget to smash the like button. Let everybody else know that the content is great, and don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so that you get notified the next time I post a video. If you love the channel and it's the best thing that's ever happened to you, consider signing up for the Laser Master Academy. It's the best way to support the channel. There's an amazing community of awesome people over there. It's so great. You get instant access to our fiber laser and CO2 laser parameter libraries. You get access to hundreds of hours of bonus live streams. It's not an exaggeration, literally hundreds of hours of bonus live streams up there for you, where we just do jobs that we need to do for the normal shop work. in real time so you can follow along. We cover a ton of different topics. It's really excellent. There's bonus episodes of the podcast, the Laser Source podcast that I do with the staff, and a whole bunch of other stuff. So if you want to support the channel, go check it out at masters.lasereverything.net. Another quick note, we just updated the buying guide for 2022. So I've got a whole bunch of new stuff in the buying guide. I'm adding stuff every week. So if you haven't already checked that out, it's lasereverything.net/buying guide. And finally, I just wanted to say thank you to everybody out there for watching this video. Sincerely, we just hit 12,000 subscribers. We have over 1,000 LMA members. We have over 2,000 Discord members. The Laser Everything community is just massive. I mean, it's gigantic, and everything that we get to do here on the channel is thanks to you guys. And again, special thanks to our Laser Master Academy members for supporting this financially and making it all possible. I really appreciate every single one of you guys. I hope this video helped you, and as always, I will see you in the next one.